Need help picking your March Madness bracket? Want to know if the stunning upsets or the chalk picks you've made all the way through make sense? Well, today here at Flurry Sports, we're trying to give you a helping hand. We've taken a look at the last 10 years and kind of overall sample sizes of March Madness tournament to see what are the odds and the trends that you can follow to impress your friends and hopefully bring home some of that sweet, sweet pool cash. So to help out, we're starting here today with a little bit of a look at the history of March Madness, give you some of that historical context before we break these numbers down and hopefully help you defy the madness this March. So to start out, this tournament that we were talking about, March Madness, began in 1939. It became the tournament we know and love seemingly in the 1980s. 1985, that bracket reached 64 teams. 2011, some people love it, some people hate it, but that is when we began to see our first 4 games. So those are those playing games for the 16 and the 11 seeds. We're going to talk about those a little later. Those are often the most neglected games of the bracket because most people fill out their bracket before those first 4 playing games. But we're going to tell you today why that might be games you want to pay attention to, especially those 11 seeds. 2020, there was no tournament. I bring that up today because for our sample size, we're looking at a 10-year stretch for the most relevant information for our trends, with some trends that extend beyond that. I'll call those out when we go through, but just know that when I call in a 10-year stretch of time, that's actually going to be 9 tournaments, excluding 2020 when we did not have one due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And the most trend, who's won lately? UConn twice, 2023, 2024. UConn is the first team to do that since 1973, where UCLA Bruins, under the legendary watch of John Wooden, had just won 7 titles in a row. Will UConn be the second team ever to win 3 in a row in March Madness? We'll see. At an 8 seed, those odds aren't great, but they could be a fun one to watch this year and gives the rest of the tournament a clear chance to win for the first time in a few years. Which teams should be the favorites? Well, there's a couple trends and a couple terms I want to call out for you here. If you're very familiar with bracket talk, the term Cinderella, picking someone who's going to go on a run unprecedented, is really popular, right? We want to get the upsets right. We want to pick the game no one else picked. But really, the things that are a little bit easier to get is knowing who the chalk is. Chalk is those games that go as advertised. Chalk means it went according to seeding, it went according to expectation. And the blue bloods of college basketball, those are the most prestigious teams with the longest legacies, the longest tenure, and the most historical success are that way for a reason. There's some teams that can be easy to watch, easy to help you fill out your bracket. If you look over the last 9 winners of the tournament, 5 of them are playing this year, and only 5. The tournament's really only been won by a handful of teams. UConn has a couple, as we mentioned. KU, Duke, Baylor, North Carolina, they join the fold there as this kind of top branch I have on your screen right now. I called these out because, as you can kind of see, these teams are the only ones who have broken through in the last decade to win the national championship. If you look at the list of winners overall for March Madness, over 2/3 of the tournament have been won by repeat winners. We see a lot of the same teams end up there. Will this be another year of that? What you can count on is some of these most prestigious teams making a run. Often we get caught up on, I hate Duke, I hate KU. But what we don't often stop is maybe some of these teams go down early. The odds that most of them make a sustained impact in the tournament are pretty high. So choosing which ones you think are looking the best for this year's tournament is going to help you stick around with the rest of your pool that often just sticks with these blue bloods anyway. UCLA, Kentucky, Louisville, Florida, Michigan State, those are the other teams in this tournament who have also won multiple championships. Some for a long time, like UCLA has not won since the 90s, and then mainly that run I mentioned with John Wooden. But still, you go through the last 10 years with any of these teams, you see sustained success. So, well, it might not be a fashionable year to pick a team like KU to make too far of a run after they've been up and down. What the odds tell you is that these teams have a lot on the line. KU has not lost in the first round of this tournament since 2005. So to make a run past the first day is often likely for them. Michigan State has advanced in all but 3 of the last 10 years. So to say that some of these teams are going to have a poor showing than maybe they should, Could happen, but the odds are that a lot of these teams that always do well will continue to hold that up. So make sure you're being smart about betting against some of these favorites and not doing it too often. As we look at that a little bit further, picking the first weekend, often this can make and break a bracket. You want to pick the teams that go on that big run, right? Like who's your Cinderella? But really, what you should be thinking about is who are the teams that are going to upset, whether they sustain that run or not in the first weekend. Well, here's what the numbers tell us about that a little bit. As we look at this first round by the numbers, those very top seeds, they don't lose. I know the one year, right? We had the wonderful moment. Number one, Virginia goes down. We have a 16 seed win. Moments like that are special for a reason. If a 16 seed is going to win, guess what? It's going to bust everybody's bracket. So everyone will remain in the same boat. Don't be the person who tries to pick the best 16 seed. It is just so uncommon. And honestly, the bracket pickers do a good job of protecting those one seeds as much as possible. So don't waste your upset picks where they should be few and wise on those number one seeds. Instead, take a look at some of those lower down seeds. Even two seeds are relatively safe for a day. If you look at the odds overall, number two seeds have only been eliminated in the very first round between 10 and 20% of the time, depending on some of those stats. In the last 10 years, it's been a little bit higher because we've seen some 15 seeds like St. Peter's go on runs in a couple of those brackets. But historically, two seeds are almost as safe as the one seeds and down so from there, which makes sense. But a trend that is emerging is on average, 1 2 seed is going to lose in the round of 32. That's the second day of the tournament. On average, that's about a 1.2 chance, according to stats there. So if you're picking a 2 seed to make it through the first round, could be a fashionable pick, and the numbers would bear out for you to pick one of those 2 seeds losing in the second round. We'll talk about where the first number 1 seeds usually lose out, but 2 seeds, if you're looking for one of the top dogs to pick, maybe bowing out earlier than all of your friends, that would be the seed you should look at. Now you're looking at what is the fashionable upset pick. The 11 seeds are going to be your most likely underdog chance outside of that 8-9 game, which is substantially a coin flip, which those close seedings often mean. I will say, though, choosing all nines is also a trend to avoid. You have to think the bracket makers know that 8-9 winner is going to face the 1 seed. So a lot of the times you'll see teams like UConn, for example, or Gonzaga in at the 8. Legacy teams that they think will make a great matchup if they play the 1 seed. So while, yes, those 8-9s are toss-ups, they can be good games to call and beat the group on a lot of them. Often they kind of stack some of the 8s. So it's a trend to watch. Those 11 seeds, however, once you get into those games where it's 6 versus 11, this is where you really have to watch out for those underdog picks. 40% of the time, an 11 seed has beaten a 6 seed in this tournament. So, we've had years like the previous season where 2 11 seeds won in the first round. You could do that again. It depends on the year with those odds. Obviously, some years 50-50 or even 3 out of the 4 is what happens. I would say you probably should pick 1 11 seed in your bracket every year to eliminate a 6 seed. Yes, you could be wrong, but those 11 seeds, as we get into the percentages, are some of the best deep run Cinderella picks. A lot of that comes from, again, the trend of those play-in games. They've had 2 of those 11 seeds are going to have one more game, be a little bit hotter, be a little bit more in the zone for the tournament. And the odds have that working out a little bit better. Those other upsets from the seeds that we haven't mentioned so far, they happen just less often. Right behind the 6 and 11 pick, unsurprisingly, the 10 and 7 upset is the next most likely. It's only slightly less, like 2% less than that 11 seed upset. But good to note that like those just don't bear out as often. 7 seeds are another one that randomly we'll see be a little bit more historically successful of those mid seeds. So 10 seeds go down there. 12 seeds. Pick 112. That is the historical thing. Most people, 12 is a very popular pick. As I mentioned, the odds actually bear out more for number 11. But 12 seed often does win. Whether one wins or not, that's more of a coin flip. But You pick a 12 versus keeping all of your fives in. Those fives aren't going to bear as much fruit for you later down the line as even getting a surprise 12 pick early, just because what the odds tell us is those fives are not as likely to make deep runs. So still pick most of your 5 over 12 matchups just with all of these. Even though the odds are pretty good for an upset to happen, here that none of these are majorities. So what you really should be figuring out is the odds that some of these upsets are going to happen are almost a certainty. But the odds that most of the upsets won't happen, of course, that's the tournament math. So don't get sucked into, I should have big upsets in the double digits in every one of my bracket quadrants. No, no, no. You should be picking 112 seed, 111 seed. And then in that second round, who's taking down your two? Some of those mid seed adjustments are there for the taking. And also, as we get into the numbers for that round of 16 and the Elite Eight and so on, know when to call it quits on your Cinderella. What you're really going to get credit for is those picks on the first weekend where you get through. Even having one of your teams who surprisingly upsets, let's say you pick a 12, they get through the 5 into the next round. The big difference in your bracket will be, does that 12 make it to the round of 16 or not? And sometimes you got to know when to fold them. Yes, that team is hot. So is the team they are playing. Don't fall into confirmation bias and be like, well, since this 12 seed just beat number 5, down goes Oregon. Here comes number 12. Doesn't mean they're going to pick up the pace always. So don't get too caught up in this narrative you're making. Just know where the numbers help you and where they don't through that first weekend and those first 2 rounds. As we look into the numbers of who makes the run, this is what's going to decide how much money you make in that pool. Because as much as the first round is fun to pick, fun to watch those trends we mentioned, first round's a crapshoot. You know some of those things are going to happen, but you don't know which teams they are going to be. But this tournament, as crazy as it can be, I'm telling you right now, if you take anything from this video, know that the later stages of this tournament can be somewhat predictable based on the numbers. So we're going to look at it round by round, starting with the round that's going to lose you the most money. That's right, the Sweet 16. So as we look at this, this is the percentages of seeds through the round of 16. So as we go around here, you can see that through all of these, you're going to see a basic trend, which is through the first 5 seeds, these percentages behave the way you would expect. So over the last 10 years, this is the percentage of the teams in the Sweet 16 that have held that seed. So 20%, a fifth of all the teams that have participated in the Sweet 16 have been those 1 seeds. And it goes down from there. Next highest is the 2 seeds with about 15%. Then that 3 seed and 4 seed right in there, just over 10%. And then 5 rounding it out at that flat 10% there. As you go around, you're going to see one jump out, and it's the one I want to start with. That 11 seed. If you go all the way down, you're going to see that the 7 seed trips the next highest. So 6 and 7 don't cooperate the way you would maybe expect. I think 7 seed is an interesting one because if you look at it, there's just been some dominant 7 seeds in the past. Whether that means, I think 8, like I mentioned, is an interesting pick for the committee because that number 8 is going to play a number 1. So I think that number 7 seed is really upholding the trend I mentioned earlier, which is a 2 seed loses. So when you think about those 2 seeds, those were some of the most dominant teams in the country who likely could have been in the talk for a number 1 seed had they been playing better, perhaps down the stretch or perhaps injuries. There's a lot of things to note. 6.4%, not high. But that 7 seed kind of bucks the trend of the 8 and the 9 and the 10 around it. So that could be one mid-seed to watch. That 11, though, 7.1%. 10 teams of the last 10 years in that Sweet 16 round have been the 11 seed. Now, again, you shouldn't be putting all of your 11 seeds in. I don't think the odds would even say you should put 2 of them in there. But to think about an 11 seed making a run, again, you have to think about those play-in games are often the teams I would most focus on because the committee is going to put teams like Texas, UNC, Xavier in there, who were really good teams at different parts of the year, probably were on the outs to the tournament, need to prove something. Well, that means whoever wins that game has momentum, often has high caliber players. And this is the secret ingredient for you. No one's picking them because they're playing games. So no one's me, you, no one knows who's going to win them. So to make that adjustment, pick one of those teams and figure it out. You don't necessarily need to know which one, but the 11 seed is the deepest seed I think you should seriously think about advancing too far. I think on the two side depression, or I should say the two seed depression I mentioned a little bit earlier, where that two seed sometimes collapses, that's where you also see the weird 2.1% represented by the 15 seed. Those again are three teams over a 10-year period. Not a huge trend, but I think if anything can show you that I don't really think you should buy into more than one or two seeds. There's just reasons that they're not ones. And usually the lower seeds in the 3 and the 4, they have about the same percentage. But again, the seeds operate the way you think. But those matchups against the 2 are one you definitely want to pay attention to. Maybe picking 1-2 seed to go down in that round of 32. That's what the numbers would support as a good chance to take. But otherwise, what I want you to pay attention here for the top seeds is, what does this mean numbers wise? Well, for the most part, those one seeds, even though they're 20%, what you can really count on is the one seeds are going to show up here. In most cases, out of the 9 tournaments again that we've seen in this stretch, in 7 of those 9, we've had at least 3 one seeds in this round. So although that 20% is there, and we've had some years where randomly we only had one make it through, always in that stretch, at least one has been here. And by and large, it's either been 3 or 4. So don't feel bad at this stage if all 4 of your one seeds are in this bracket. And honestly, I would take a critical look at even having as few as 2. Like, you probably should have closer 3 to 4, depending on a year. These one seeds are really tough. And unless there's a wagon that you know that they're going to run into, a team like UConn that you feel really good about, they're one seeds for a reason. And for the most part, you really should feel confident about keeping your one seeds in. And then those 2, 3, and 4s, you kind of follow along accordingly. And I would really stick away from some of those random other numbers making too many deep runs, or at least not having more than 1 8 seed or 1 9 seed. Like, those teams just statistically don't show up in this round as much. You move on to the Elite 8, you're going to see our biggest trend, which is your one seeds. Every slide I show you today, your one seeds get more and more dominant. Makes sense on paper, but don't lose as we go through the future rounds that you put your bracket together. How many one seeds should I keep in? Pick the ones you feel really good about. And, if you get your one seed pick right, you've got a great chance of picking your bracket, because the odds are that they will be in the last game are really high. So I'm going to be harping on that point a lot. But here you see those percentages stay about the same in terms of where they compare to each other. But we're going to start to see them get separated from each other a little bit, especially the one seed and everybody else. So here in the Elite 8, now we're close to 30% of that pool has been a number one seed. I will say, as we get into the Elite 8 now we're looking at, okay, 3 of these teams max, 3 of the 9 years were 3 out of the 4 one seeds. One time it was still all 4 of the one seeds, so just under half. But here we're a little closer to the actual bulk of those were 2 one seeds were still in the Elite 8. Only once was there only one, and one time, the first year UConn won it, there were no one seeds still in the Elite 8. So really, what you should be seeing there, and by the way, that's the only year that's happened, even going back further than that for close to 20 years. So you really should keep one seeds around in the Elite 8. Even 2 is what the numbers would tell you, is to keep those around. And I said it's just as likely to have 3 or 4 as it is to have 2 at this stage. So keep that in mind with your one seeds. As we see these peter out, what you should really be thinking about as you get to the Elite 8, some of those 11 seeds, still now you're talking about one of those teams, 2 of those teams, that in the 5 seed making runs. But now your pool should get smaller. Maybe you have 2 4 seeds, a couple 2s and 3s. Your Elite 8 should have 1, maybe 2 underdog picks, and I would consider that 4 seeds and under. So anywhere in that 1 or 2, and then otherwise it should be dominated by 1 through 3 seeds. And honestly, the bulk of it should still be made up of that 1 to 2 spot, as you can see here on the percentages. But as you get further and further along, this is where you can't get sucked into the mind games of, well, my Cinderella is going to make it all the way. If that happens, great, but the odds are you've already gotten the most out of your Cinderella at this point in the bracket. Now it's time to kind of attach your apologies, attach your wagon to the best horse in the game. That's going to be your top seeds. So this, our final four, you can see how much the one seed just starts to totally dominate this side of the bracket. So about 40%, 38.9% of all the teams over the last 10 years that have made the final four have been one seeds. You do the math out there. Most final fours, only one final four hasn't had any that same year that I mentioned before, obviously. But otherwise, most of them still have two. 2-1 is still a good shot. So even picking 2 through here is good. Here's where I will say we haven't had any where all four have been one seeds. So this is where I project caution before this stage, leaving too many of your one seeds out. Once we hit here, though, you're going to see that, okay, now 4 one seeds is not very likely. The odds that someone gets them along the way are pretty good. So picking a one seed, even 2 one seeds to lose out in the round of 8, especially would be the round I would suggest thinking about it. Maybe Sweet 16, but definitely not before then. But by the time you get here, figure out which one seeds you feel really good about and get attached, because odds are you're going to want to bring them with you to the championship if you want to follow what the numbers say are going to happen. Again, you can see the magic being sprinkled on the 11 seed back there. Here, the 5 seeds over the last 10 years have also kind of fought through. This is where I'm saying if we've seen deep seed runs, those 7 and 11s, again, are the ones that are making the deepest run. So those are seeds, again, it's just what the numbers are telling us, have the most persistence in these tournaments. So if you're going to take random shots at the dark at deep teams, haven't said it, but I'll mention it here. Obviously, at this stage, let's not reach above an 11. If you've got High Point, if you've got McNeese, all these teams that people are talking about making possible shocks here in March Madness, they got to be gone by the time we get even to the Elite Eight, certainly by the Final Four. Even an 11 seed, like, yeah, see that 8.3%, see that's just as high as a 5. It's higher than our 4 seeds and 3 seeds. But note that really what tells you is of these 4 teams, most likely you pick one, probably should pick 2 one seeds and then 1 2 or 2 twos, maybe a 3 or an 11. So that's where those seeds get in there. Is often the 2s and the 1s have representation at this stage. Everyone else is kind of fighting for certainty to be in there. So this one you can trust your gut a little bit, but as you pick your champions, this is what I really want to highlight, and this will also inform your Final Four. Is you think of your numbers on the left, I have all the teams that have made it to the championship game. On the right, I've just isolated those 9 winners. So you can see in there the folks who have made it to the championship game, we have a little bit of, a disparity, but the 1 seed is still, or a little bit of variety, but the 1 seed is dominating that. 2/3 of all of the championship game opponents have been 1 seeds. It is just as likely for 2 1 seeds to be there as any other seeded matchup. So again, even we get to the Final Four, those numbers tell you, okay, Final Four is probably the toughest stage for 1 seeds in terms of percentage representation. Like, that's the seed where you could have 1 or only 2. But once we make it to the championship game, only once, it's that same year, have we, over the last decade and close to 20 years, had a matchup without a 1 seed in it. You should be thinking about, is my matchup just 2 1 seeds or is it 1 seed? I really think the numbers, if it's not going to have any 1 seeds there, every bracket's hosed. You just got to hope that yours had the best predictions, the best odds the rest of the way. So you really should be picking which 1 seed is yours. And as we talk about winners, I mean, more than likely of our last 9 winners, 7 have been 1 seeds. And I want to point out, the 1-4 seed and the 1-2 seed were either future or past 1 seeds. That 2 seed there is Villanova. Long time, that goes back to the Blue Bloods example I shared earlier too. So yes, they're a 2 seed, but they were a strong elite team for many, many years, who was always in those top 3 seeds. 4 seed was UConn's first year when no other 1 seeds made it through. Then UConn was the overall number 1 a year ago. So yes, those upsets can happen as they have here. But your best bet is to pick the one seed you feel the best about. And although madness can happen, what the numbers tell you is it's not that common. Often the Cinderellas only make it so far before that pumpkin comes back around at midnight. So keep that in mind as you take a look at some of those percentages there. You can see that some of those seeds, the 3 seed has a surprisingly good showing after being pretty low, making it all the way through. You can see none of our 11s cracked it into the championship game. So even that run has a ceiling. And then all of those 5.6 examples, those are one team, right? So that 2 seed is Villanova. That 4 seed is UConn, same as we're talking about over here. So really what we're talking about is 2, 3 seeds and then one of everything else, and the rest are ones. So by the time we get to the championship game, it's really the big dogs are dancing. So figuring out which of these top teams you want to go all the way is where March Madness can often separate in those pools. People who get too caught up in the unpredictability of it to realize eventually those teams have to go through the best teams in the country. And while not all of those best teams will be there still dancing, odds are the one who is still dancing brought some pretty good tap shoes. So don't get too caught up in the unpredictability of March, right? It's mad. It's not crazy. You can figure it out. These numbers would point you out. If you like the video today, if you feel like you've got a better feel for what your bracket's going to do, I hope you share in the comments. I hope you share this video around. Hopefully understand some of those numbers a little bit better. But remember, pick some fun upsets. Don't go crazy in how many you pick, and certainly be cautious with how deep some of those Cinderella runs are going. Because when it comes to the numbers in March, your best bet is to follow along those seeds pretty close and hope you get lucky. Till then, have a great day. We hope you enjoyed the video.
Fuck yeah!